Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jonathan Ventura, and I'm going to talk today very briefly about what we call now the social design network. I'm going to start by introducing myself very quickly. I did my first training as a design anthropologist in Israel, and after a brief period at the Royal College of Art, I'm currently specializing in social design. And I teach at two academic higher institute in Israel, Hadassah Academic College and Shenkar, and I work in a design studio that's called Public Zone. So the major point for me today would be why social design, why now, and again, very briefly try to define the concept of social design, which is not simple. So obviously, a first starting point would be social design should be defined as making the world a better place, but obviously it's not that simple. So is that all? And how do we even start? I mean, it's so big and so complex. How can this even be done? So going back to previously around 4 years ago, which was the first moment in which we started thinking about this network, we started identifying large issues that obviously influence design, and that's what we call meta design or the wicked questions of design. One of them was a growing current of refugees. As you can see in this image, back in 2015, a stream of refugees found themselves at the central part of Budapest, and again, this kind of tackled or raised some issues. Where can designers influence in these kind of major events? Another point that again we can see in the last few years, the rise of populist right leaders around Europe and obviously back in the US and South America. So again, how can design even address these kind of issues? Obviously, COVID-19 entered the scene 2 years ago, and as I said, we started thinking about this network around a year before COVID. But again, apart from designing better face masks or other venues for people to keep social distancing, how can designers influence healthcare? Again, Trump supporters storming the Capitol. So again, it's very large issues around the globe. But again, social inequality. Some people get a lot of money and create unhealthy working stations. And the last straw, I think, for most of us was that last year the major event in the design work got canceled in Milan. And for us, we started thinking, is that so bad? And if it was canceled, how can we go back to the world before all these major changes? So we started developing our network, as I said, around 2018. And we started outlining first the need. Why do we need such a network? And the answer in a nutshell is that we need some kind of a starting point that should be global, but starting locally around Europe, to gather up ideas and practitioners and researchers and focus directly and specifically on what we call social design. And our niche, if we can call it that, is a network that cares and caters for people and communities first, and then other partners such as local governments and the industry. So these are our current members, as you can see. Hadassah Academic College and Moholy-Nagy Institute in Budapest are the main administrators and organizers of the network. And then we have a lot of institutes from the UK, from the Netherlands, from Belgium, from Italy and Spain, Estonia and Germany. And in the last two months, we were able finally to gather 2 more partners from outside of Europe. From Canada, we have OCA, then we have NID from the National Institute of Design from Ahmedabad in India. So very briefly, going back to a sort of a historical starting point, from a research point of view, we started thinking about why or how is social design better or even different than other currents that we had in the last 20 years. For example, social design, inclusive design. And as you can see in this brief slide, inclusive design, while is again very good and very healthy for society, has its own problems. First of all, it's very focused on industry, and it allows less leeway for communities and individuals themselves to create some kind of change that is not dependent on industry. So if we can again identify the last 30 years, as inclusive design started growing back in the early 1990s, especially in Scandinavia and the UK. As you can see, inclusive design is inclusive because it tackles our own future self. That was the first major exhibition back in the UK. But then 20 years later, we started thinking on producing what is currently called political design or speculative design, which tackled the wicked questions of design. As again, we heard in the last presentation, should we design at all? I mean, haven't we done enough damage to the world? And other questions like what should be the very definition of the designer, and how can designers influence their societies and their communities? And then in the last 5 years, we started again narrowing the field and defining it more closely and more accurately. And we started defining it as value-oriented design, in which, first of all, we define values that are oriented towards communities and individuals. And then moving from that point to social design, in which we can define as all of the above, plus some innovative angles, such as in-depth theory and research, empathy, pluralism, and caring, and design that is needed, not that is fashionable, or not that is, currently in the buzzwords or anything in that domain. So social design for us is, first of all, people-driven. First of all, we cater for people, value-oriented, as I mentioned before, ethical in the broadest way. I mean, we obviously follow an ethics code, but ethics are a major point of our network. It's needed, not fashionable. We're talking about a revolution and not an evolution. It's rooted in research and theory, which means we're talking long-term processes and not something that can be done in a week or two. And it's not limited to a single methodology or subdiscipline. And in a way, as we can see here, when we talk about education and educating the next generation of designers, we talk about, again, it sounds a bit far-fetched, but it will, I hope, and I believe it will become the standard. We're talking about social designers that were trained as social designers and not as either graphic designers or industrial designers or even architects, but someone that can do all of the above, but from a social point of view. Obviously, research is a major point for us, and we're gonna, again, do whatever academics do in their spare time, which means publication and conferences, etc. So that in general are our three main domains: research, education, starting with online courses, and then continuing to master's program and Ph.D. networks. And obviously practice, because we believe that it is very important while we start from academia, because we can find dedicated people that can work pro bono. But later on, beginning next year, we will start working with the NGOs, and then with the industry partners, and then local governments, and even global institutions. So moving forward, again, it sounds a lot of words, and it needs more action. But as I mentioned, our first, as I guess you all know, it's very difficult to bring together all these people from different countries, but we managed to do that, and we penciled our first event for March 2020, and as you know, it was a very bad point of time, because all the borders got closed, and COVID-19 was upon us throughout the world. But again, we did manage to have 6 online events throughout last year, and then we had our first physical meeting back in October, 2 months ago. And in this meeting back in Budapest, we started developing our own network, an organizational chart, aims and goals, budget allocation, etc. And next year we have other 2 events and projects that we will start bringing on forward through our various partners. Basically NGOs, 1 or 2 industry partners and local governments back in Budapest and in Barcelona and Jerusalem. Our next event will be in Jerusalem in March, and then another one probably in either September or October in Berlin. So obviously you're all welcome to see and to participate online. So that's again in the nutshell the plan. We start with HEIs, educators and people we can recruit pro bono. We believe obviously in do good in general, change the market, change how designers think and act, and later on change future industry partners and other rings of influence. We call first of all for a deep and broad change. We started with publishing a manifesto, which will come out, I believe, in a month or 2. And as I mentioned, our first ring of partners are academics, and then other partners from industry and governments. Okay, so as you can see here, oh no, the red is not good. But again, okay, that's going back to the same thing. And I'm just gonna conclude with 2 examples, one from the network and one from my own college that can perhaps showcase very, very briefly this whole approach towards social design. So again, if you look at our site, you can check it out. It's sponsored by MOME, which is the college back in Budapest. We're called the Social Design Network, or SDN. You can see the content. You can there's a link to YouTube, and you can see all the recordings from all the sessions. So again, 2 projects or 3 very briefly. The first one was during COVID. MOME worked with the Hungarian Red Cross, and they did a sort of an open source, open code design. There's a few PDFs that people can download, and then they can produce themselves a sort of a kit for newborns. So it's called Baba Pack, but there's various open source kits like that. One is for newborns, one is for the elderly, and one is for everyone that wants to know how to live a better life through lockdown and the effects of COVID. So as you can see, you go to the MOME website, you download the kit. It's very simple. It's a PDF of 5 to 7 pages. You can see how to create a cradle, how to create plush toys for newborns, from basic materials that everyone has in their own house, either cardboard, a piece of cloth that you have. So this was one of the projects that was very, very successful. And another one, I'm just gonna skip through this one. Back in Hadassah Academic College, just to showcase the broad potential of social design, was targeted at local communities of transgender women. And in this project, the student tried to facilitate this arduous journey for trans women that wanted to go through the process, but got hampered by the Israeli bureaucracy. So she did a campaign with the website, and created a logo, and tried to facilitate this very hard journey for the woman that went through this process. So again, that's it for me in general, and I hope if anyone wants to join or even hear about the network, just look out the site, check us out in YouTube. If you have any questions, I'll happily send an answer or more data. Thank you.